There's a moment in The Joy, Season 3, Episode 4, that I think about more than I should. It happens near the end. Miss Simeon, who's been running from her infected students for the entire episode, who's been treated this whole time like the final girl in a zombie movie, finally gets cornered. She's backed against a wall. The rainbow-drooling, dead-eyed, grinning students are closing in, and just before they reach her, there's a single frame, maybe two, where her face does something you almost never see on this show. She looks genuinely afraid. Not cartoon afraid, not exaggerated, pupils popping out of her skull, afraid. She looks like a person who understands that something terrible is about to happen to her, and there's nothing she can do about it. And then the episode ends. No resolution, no cure, no magical reset. Just Miss Simeon, consumed by the joy virus. Her face stretched into the same horrifying grin as everyone else. Roll credits. That's a kids show. That aired on Cartoon Network, with a TVY7 rating. And here's what gets me. Nobody talks about this. I mean, people talk about the joy virus as a concept, sure. It shows up on Darkest Gumball episodes lists. But nobody really sits with what that ending means. Nobody talks about the fact that a show rated for 7-year-olds just did a zombie apocalypse episode with no happy ending, where the last survivor gets infected on screen, where the implied fate of every single character in Elmore is to spend eternity in a state of forced chemical happiness with rainbow fluid leaking from their eyes. That's not subversive. That's not pushing boundaries. That's a show that looked at the line of what's acceptable in children's television and walked past it like the line wasn't there. So if you're listening to this late at night, settle in, get comfortable, because tonight we're going somewhere most Gumball videos don't go. We're not talking about fan theories or character secrets or the philosophical underpinnings of the show. We've done all that in previous videos, and if you haven't watched those, go check them out. They're worth your time. Tonight, we're talking about the dark side, the part of the amazing world of Gumball that you don't see on the merchandise. The body horror, the psychological terror, the adult content smuggled past the censors so cleverly that kids don't even notice it's there. The episodes so disturbing that Cartoon Network itself struggled with whether to air them. The moment where a show about a blue cat and a walking goldfish quietly became one of the most transgressive things on television. And if you haven't subscribed yet, this would be a good time, because we're going to be here for a while, and it really does help us keep making these for you. Here's the thing that people get wrong about Gumball's darkness. They treat it like a bug. Like the show's real identity is the goofy comedy, and the dark stuff is just edge for edge's sake, thrown in to keep the older fans watching. That's wrong. The darkness isn't a feature Gumball has. The darkness is what Gumball is. From the very beginning, from the moment Ben Bacalé sat down and built Elmore out of rejected commercial characters, literal creative rejects, thrown away by the industries that made them, the show was built on a foundation of discarded things. And discarded things are, by nature, kind of sad. Think about it. Gumball's original concept was a school for characters who'd been rejected from other shows and other projects. That's the DNA. That's the origin story, not a funny cat goes to school. A school for things nobody wanted. And even though the final product softened that premise considerably, the bones of it are still there in every episode. Elmore is a town of misfit toys. The citizens are animated in clashing styles, not just for visual comedy, but because they don't belong together. They were never meant to coexist. They're all refugees from different realities, crammed into one town, forced to interact, and the show knows it. And sometimes, more often than most people realize, the show lets you feel exactly how wrong that is. Let me start where I think the darkness really begins. Not in the horror episodes, not in the body horror gags, but in something quieter, something that sits underneath the entire series like a low hum you don't notice until someone points it out. The Wattersons are not okay. I know we talked about some of the character details in the last video, the hidden backstories and the secrets, but I skirted around something I want to address head on tonight, which is that this family, when you strip away the cartoon logic and the slapstick and the sitcom framing, is deeply, structurally dysfunctional in ways that the show treats as both comedy and tragedy, sometimes in the same sentence. Nicole Watterson works at the Rainbow Factory for $950 a month. We learn this in The Treasure, Season 3, Episode 11. $950 a month for a family of 5 in a house that, despite its cartoon proportions, is implied to be in a suburban neighborhood with property taxes and utility bills. Richard doesn't work, We know from The Job, Season 2, Episode 11, that Richard literally cannot work because his employment causes reality to collapse. The universe itself has decided that this man must remain unemployed, which means Nicole's salary is it. That's the whole thing. $950. And somehow she keeps the lights on and food on the table and the mortgage paid and her 3 children clothed and in school. And the show plays this for comedy most of the time, but every now and then it lets the mask slip. In The Money, Season 3, Episode 39, the Wattersons actually run out of money, completely. And what happens is one of the most genuinely uncomfortable 11 minutes in the show's history. The animation starts degrading. The colors start draining out of the backgrounds. Product placements begin appearing because the show literally cannot afford to exist without them. Characters start hawking brands mid-conversation. The fourth wall doesn't break so much as dissolve, and underneath it isn't a wink at the audience. It's a scream. The show is saying, this is what poverty looks like when you're a fictional character. You don't just lose your house, you lose your reality. You lose the visual quality of your own existence. I need you to think about that. A children's cartoon made an episode where being poor means your world becomes uglier, where financial ruin manifests as aesthetic decay, where the Wattersons have to choose between dignity and survival, and they choose survival. And survival looks like letting corporations stamp their logos all over your life just so you can keep existing. If that isn't dark, I don't know what is. But we haven't even gotten to the horror yet. And Gumball has real horror. Not cartoon scary, not spooky season special horror. Genuine, well-crafted, sometimes deeply unsettling horror that uses the show's unique visual language, the mixed media, the clashing animation styles, the live-action backgrounds, to create something that shouldn't work on a kid's network, but absolutely does. Let's talk about The Joy properly. I mentioned it at the top, but it deserves a full breakdown because I think it's one of the best horror episodes in any animated series, period. Not just kids animation, any animation. The premise is simple. Richard gives Gumball and Darwin a wonder hug one morning because it's Monday, and they're grumpy. The hug works too well. It fills them with an overwhelming, uncontrollable happiness that presents as a virus. Their eyes go dark. Rainbow-colored fluid starts leaking from their mouths. They start grinning in a way that is, and I cannot stress this enough, one of the most unsettling images this show has ever produced. These are characters we know. Characters with round, friendly, familiar faces. And now, those faces are stretched into grins that don't touch the eyes, with multicolored drool running down their chins. And they're spreading this joy through physical contact, through hugging. The episode is structured as a found footage horror film. Miss Simeon's classroom camera picks up the initial infection. The school's CCTV captures the spread. And Miss Simeon, this is the part that kills me. Miss Simeon, the character who is consistently portrayed as the worst teacher in Elmore, the oldest and most jaded person in the building, becomes the hero. She's the one trying to contain the outbreak. She's the one barricading doors and documenting the symptoms and desperately trying to reach someone, anyone, who will believe her. There's a scene where she's on the phone with a medical professional, trying to describe what's happening. And the doctor doesn't believe her. Because how could you believe this? A happiness virus? Rainbow drool? The whole school grinning like they've been possessed? It sounds insane. And Miss Simeon knows it sounds insane. But she's watching it happen in real time. And nobody will help. And the infected are getting closer. And the camera, the show's actual camera, starts showing signs of infection too. The footage warps. The audio distorts. Even the show itself is getting sick. I've watched a lot of animation. I've watched Courage the Cowardly Dog and Invader Zim and the dark episodes of Adventure Time. And I genuinely think The Joy might be the single most effective piece of horror any of them have produced. Not because of gore, there isn't any. Not because of jump scares, there are none. Because of the atmosphere. Because the show takes something universally positive, joy, happiness, hugging, and slowly, methodically reveals it as a contagion, as something that destroys individuality and replaces it with a uniform, dripping, rainbow-stained smile. And that ending, I keep coming back to that ending. Miss Simeon gets infected, the last holdout falls, and there's no miracle cure, no last-minute save, no status quo reset. The show just ends. The credits roll over the school's surveillance footage, showing every character in Elmore Junior High in that same horrifying state, and the next episode acts like it never happened. The reset is implied, but never shown, which means somewhere, In the continuity of Gumball, an entire school was consumed by a joy plague, and nobody addressed it. Okay, let me pull back for a second here, because I realize I'm going in pretty heavy, and I should probably acknowledge something. I started this video planning to just catalog the dark moments, like a highlight reel. Hey, here's the creepy stuff in Gumball. Wild, right? But as I put it together, I noticed a pattern I wasn't expecting, and I think it's worth talking about because it changes the whole shape of what the show is doing. The darkness in Gumball isn't random. It escalates. Season by season, episode by episode, the show gets darker. Not in a straight line. There are comedy episodes scattered throughout that are pure slapstick joy, but the trajectory is unmistakable. Season 1 has some mildly uncomfortable moments. Season 2 has the finale and the flower. Season 3 has the joy, the downer, and the safety. Season 4 has the disaster. Season 5 and the puppets. Season 6 has the Inquisition, and the revival ramps it up even further. The show is getting darker because the show is growing up. And for the first half of this video, I want to take that seriously. I want to trace the darkness from its earliest, most subtle forms all the way to the moments that made me genuinely wonder how they got this on television. Let's go back to Season 2. The Flower, Season 2, Episode 5, is, on paper, a comedy episode about jealousy. Gumball gets jealous of Leslie, a potted flower who's been spending time with Penny. Standard sitcom stuff, right? Except the show doesn't play it as standard sitcom stuff. The jealousy is portrayed as a literal entity, a green, spiky creature that takes over Gumball's body. Gumball doesn't just get annoyed at Leslie. He builds a death trap. An actual honest-to-God death trap designed to kill another student at his school. I want to sit with that. A 12-year-old boy, driven by romantic jealousy, constructs a lethal trap for a classmate in a children's cartoon. And the only reason Leslie survives is a design flaw. The jealousy creature didn't glue the pot properly. If it had, Leslie would be dead. A character would have been murdered by a 12-year-old because he was talking to the main character's crush. The show treats this with the exact right amount of weight, which is to say, it treats it both as absurd comedy and as genuinely alarming. The exorcism scene at the end of the episode is played for laughs. Yes, but the underlying premise, that a child can be so consumed by a negative emotion that it literally takes over his body and compels him to violence, isn't a joke. It's a genuinely dark observation about what jealousy does to people, dressed up in cartoon clothing. And then there's the finale, Season 2, Episode 40, which is one of the most conceptually disturbing episodes of anything I've ever watched. And it's all done through comedy. The premise is beautiful in its simplicity. What if a sitcom family had to face the consequences of everything they'd ever done? The Wattersons sit down, look through their family photo album, and reminisce about their adventures. Standard clip show format. Except this time, all the people they've wronged across 2 seasons of chaos come knocking. Larry shows up with bills for all the property damage. Principal Brown informs them their kids have to restart from kindergarten because they've spent the last 2 years fighting with classmates instead of learning. Mrs. Jotunheim presents a bill for the 75% of Elmore that was destroyed in Hector's rampage, which the Wattersons caused. Every slapstick moment, every zany adventure, everything went back to normal at the end. All of it is retroactively given weight. All of it mattered. All of it did damage. The episode ends with an angry mob breaking into the Watterson house. The family is cornered. Nicole says it's the end, and Gumball says the only thing that could save them would be some kind of magical device that completely resets reality. Then the screen cuts to black, and the credits roll. That's how Season 2 ends, with the implication that the Wattersons might actually be killed by a mob of their own neighbors, with the meta-textual suggestion that the only reason any of this works, the only reason a sitcom can exist, is because consequences are artificially erased at the end of every episode. And by acknowledging that erasure, the show has made it impossible to ignore. After the finale, you can never fully buy the reset again. You'll always know, somewhere in the back of your mind, that the damage is real, the status quo is a lie, and the citizens of Elmore remember everything, even if the narrative won't let them act on it. Look, I've been putting off talking about The Downer, Season 3, Episode 37, because it makes me uncomfortable in a way that's hard to articulate. Not uncomfortable like a horror movie. Uncomfortable like watching someone you care about go through something you recognize. The episode starts simply. Gumball is in a bad mood. Not a funny bad mood. Not a cartoon grumpy bad mood. An actual, recognizable, could be clinical, bad mood. The kind of bad mood where you don't want to get out of bed, where everything irritates you, where the people trying to help make it worse. His family tries to cheer him up, and he snaps at them. He tells them to go away. And then, in a move that blurs the line between fantasy and metaphor, they do. Everyone does. Elmore empties out. Gumball is alone. What follows is 11 minutes of a cartoon character experiencing something that looks a lot like depression. The empty Elmore is genuinely eerie. The photographic backgrounds, usually so full of incidental detail and texture, become oppressive in their stillness. Signs change to reflect Gumball's mood. Joyful Burger becomes Misery Burger. The crosswalk sign changes to No Escape. The show is showing us what it looks like inside a depressive episode, using Elmore itself as the mental landscape. The town isn't empty because everyone left. The town is empty because when you're that deep in it, other people feel unreachable. And then the darkness comes. This amorphous, pitch-black entity that starts consuming Elmore, closing in on Gumball from all sides. Not attacking him, just eliminating everything. The buildings, the streets, the sky. Until Gumball is standing in nothing, surrounded by nothing, with this thing pressing in on him from every direction. And in that moment, which is played completely straight, no comedy, no ironic distance, Gumball looks genuinely scared. Here's what gets me about the downer. Ben Bacalé has said publicly that the original draft of this episode was significantly darker. He described it on Twitter as excessively dark, and rewrote it because the early version was too much. The Lost Media Wiki has an entry for the original draft. It has never surfaced. Nobody knows exactly what the original version contained, but the fact that what we got, a 12-year-old cat hallucinating an empty world while an embodiment of nihilism consumes his reality, was the toned-down version, that tells you everything about where this show's instincts actually lie. I actually have a theory about the downer that I've never seen anyone else bring up. I think the original draft depicted something closer to a genuine mental health crisis for Gumball. Not metaphorical, explicit. And I think Bacalé pulled back because depicting a child character in that kind of crisis would have been irresponsible for a show with a young audience. But the fingerprints are still there. The darkness, the isolation, the way the world literally becomes hostile to Gumball's existence. These aren't random, they're symptoms. And the show knows it. The fact that the resolution, Darwin appearing, the family returning, happens because it's revealed to be a hallucination. That isn't a cop-out. That's accurate. The bad day ends. The people didn't actually leave. You just couldn't see them while you were in it. And there's something incredibly tender about the show choosing to end on that note. Not the magic was broken, but you were always surrounded by people who love you, even when you couldn't feel it. For a kid's show, look, I'm not getting emotional over a cartoon about a blue cat, but if I were, this would be the moment. Before we move on from the downer, there's one more thing I want to say about it. The episode is 11 minutes long. That's all Gumball episodes. 11 minutes. And in those 11 minutes, the show manages to depict the full arc of a depressive episode. The irritability, the isolation, the world becoming hostile, the creeping darkness that feels like it will never end, and then the return, the world coming back, the people reappearing, the realization that it was, in some fundamental way, temporary, even though, while you were in it, it felt infinite. 11 minutes. Most prestige dramas can't pull that off in a full hour. Gumball does it in the time it takes to make a sandwich. And the reason it works is the animation. The photographic backgrounds going gray, the signs changing, the darkness closing in. A live-action show would need extensive set dressing and lighting changes and atmospheric effects to convey what Gumball conveys by simply shifting the world. Tweaking the backgrounds, letting the mixed media environment do the emotional work. This is what I mean when I say Gumball's darkness isn't a gimmick. The show's visual language, the thing that makes it look weird and unique, and unlike anything else on television, is the same thing that makes its darkness so effective. The form and the content are inseparable. You couldn't make the downer in a traditionally animated show. You couldn't make the joy in live action. These stories need Gumball's specific visual toolbox to function. The darkness isn't grafted onto the show. It grows out of the show's DNA. Okay, let me shift to something less personally uncomfortable and more conventionally terrifying. The Safety, Season 3, Episode 32, is the episode that turns Darwin Watterson, the most relentlessly positive character on the show, into a fascist dictator. And it does it in 11 minutes. And it's funny, and it's disturbing. And I think about it every time I see a real-world policy justified with the phrase, "for your own safety." The setup is perfect. A safety video is shown in health class. It's one of those old British public information films. Creepy, stilted, disturbingly graphic in a low-budget way. The show actually had this video animated by Jeremy Perrin, who'd previously done pixel art sequences for The Words. The safety video traumatizes everyone in the room. Mr. Small, the school counselor, puts a trash bin on his head and rocks in the corner. The other students leave with thousand-yard stares. But Darwin absorbs it, and he decides the world isn't safe enough. What follows is a slow-motion escalation from overprotective friend to surveillance state architect. Darwin installs a child filter on the Watterson house. This filter censors swear words, but it also censors violence and danger, and eventually it censors everything. When Gumball tries to go to the bathroom, the censor bar that normally covers his nudity is there, but underneath it, there's nothing. The filter has censored his body out of existence. That's a joke about censorship that works on about 4 different levels simultaneously. On the surface, it's a visual gag. One layer down, it's a commentary on how content moderation taken to its logical extreme eliminates the thing it's trying to protect. One more layer down, it's about how safety culture infantilizes the people it claims to serve. And at the deepest level, it's asking whether a censored existence is an existence at all, whether safety without autonomy is just a prettier kind of prison. And it goes further. Darwin doesn't stop at the house. He takes over the town. He sets up surveillance monitors. He builds a lair. He wears a cape. His banner symbol, and this is not subtle, bears a striking resemblance to the Nazi Party's eagle emblem. When his family confronts him, they explain that the whole town does whatever Darwin says, because, and I quote, "he's really cute." Nicole demonstrates this by imitating Darwin's adorable face while delivering the lines, "all resistance is futile," and "those who stray from the path will be corrected." I'm going to say that again because I need you to hear it. A show aimed at 7-year-olds used the character's cuteness as a metaphor for how authoritarian regimes gain popular support. The citizens of Elmore didn't resist Darwin's takeover because his authoritarianism was wrapped in adorableness. He was so cute while explaining his plans for world domination that they just let him do it. And the show is making the explicit argument that this is how it works in reality too. People follow dangerous leaders not because they're compelling argumentatively, but because the packaging is appealing. The smile is warm. The voice is soothing. The intentions sound good. Today, a safer Elmore. Tomorrow, a safer world. I know I keep saying this, but that's a kids show on Cartoon Network at 4 in the afternoon. Speaking of censorship, I want to talk about something that I think is underappreciated in the Gumball discourse, which is the show's relationship with its own network. Gumball was produced by Studio SOY and later Hanna-Barbera Studios Europe, based in London. It was made by a primarily British and European team for a primarily American network, and this created a tension that the show itself weaponized for comedy. Gumball was censored differently in different regions. Scenes that aired uncensored in Europe were cut or altered for the American broadcast. The safety itself is partially a response to this. Bocalé and his team were reportedly frustrated by the American censorship standards and made an entire episode satirizing the concept of child-proofing content. The show's awareness of its own censorship, its willingness to mock the systems that constrain it. This isn't just meta humor. It's a form of resistance. And it gives the dark content an extra edge, because you know that every disturbing moment that made it to air did so despite active resistance from the people whose job it was to prevent exactly that kind of content from reaching children. And this is where the show's British production becomes really relevant. The Amazing World of Gumball was made in London. Most of the writers were British or European, and European children's television has always had a different relationship with darkness than American children's television. British kids' TV has a long tradition of terrifying its audience. Watership Down, the public information films of the 1970s, Doctor Who, Hiding Behind the Sofa, the casual brutality of Roald Dahl. There's a cultural assumption in British children's entertainment that kids can handle more than American networks typically allow. Gumball lives at the intersection of these two traditions. It was made by people with European sensibilities about what children can handle, for a network with American sensibilities about what children should be shown. And that tension is productive. The show's constant push against its own boundaries, the way it keeps finding new angles to smuggle dark content past the censors, isn't just rebellious, it's creative. The restrictions force the show to be inventive. You can't show explicit violence? Fine. We'll show the aftermath. You can't depict death directly? Fine. We'll make it a running gag about a character who's already made of toast. You can't have adult content? Fine. We'll make it so encrypted that you literally have to be an adult to decode it. Some of the show's most brilliant moments come from this negotiation. The Apology, Season 2, Episode 25, features Miss Simeon chasing Gumball through the school in a state of primal rage. It's terrifying. She's genuinely trying to hurt him. But because the show can't depict a teacher physically assaulting a student, not directly, not on a kid's network, it instead shows the anticipation of the violence. The footsteps getting closer, the shadows on the wall, the hallways stretching out ahead of Gumball as he runs. It's Hitchcock for the Cartoon Network generation, and it's more effective than explicit violence would have been, because what you imagine is always worse than what you see. The show learned early that implication is more powerful than depiction, that the space between what's shown and what's understood is where the real horror lives. And this principle, born from necessity, from the constraints of the TVY7 rating and the network's standards and practices, became one of the show's greatest creative assets. Gumball doesn't show you the worst thing. It shows you just enough to let your brain fill in the rest. And your brain, being a wonderful and terrible machine, always fills in something worse than the show could have gotten away with showing. That's genius. That's turning a limitation into a superpower. And it's one of the reasons Gumball's darkness hits harder than shows with higher ratings that can show more explicit content, because the darkness in Gumball lives in your head, and you can't turn off the screen in your head. I want to slow down here and talk about body horror, because Gumball might have the most inventive body horror in children's television, and I don't think that's widely recognized. The show's mixed media animation style, 2D characters on photographic backgrounds with 3D elements, puppet characters, pixel art, anime-style sequences, and live-action inserts all coexisting in the same frame, creates a visual landscape where literally anything can happen to a character's body. And the writers take full advantage of this. In The Gut, and I need to verify this one, but I believe it's in Season 4, Richard's stomach gains sentience after he swallows one of Aeneas's inventions. His belly takes over his body. His head goes limp and hangs off the back like, in Gumball's own words, a soggy, wet trash bag. His stomach begins making decisions, walking around, refusing to let Richard eat so that it can maintain control. The body horror isn't just in the visual, which is nightmarish. It's in the concept. Your own body turning against you. Your organs developing a separate consciousness and overriding your will. Being a passenger in your own flesh. And this isn't an isolated incident. Gumball's body is subjected to extraordinary abuse across the series. He's been flattened, stretched, inflated, deflated, turned inside out, split in half, reassembled incorrectly, and, in one memorably disturbing moment, had his face literally rearranged by the joy virus. When he tries to force a frown during the infection, his face contorts and twists itself back into a grin. His own facial muscles override his will. His body has been recruited by the virus and turned against his consciousness. Think about what that means for a character. Your body isn't yours anymore. Your expressions aren't yours. The smile on your face is a lie, and you know it's a lie, but you can't stop it. That's not cartoon slapstick. That's existential horror dressed up in primary colors. I've rewatched The Photo, Season 2, Episode 14, probably 8 times while putting this video together, and it gets worse every time. Gumball needs a good school photo. Simple enough premise. But in his quest for the perfect smile, he takes "smile with your eyes" too literally. His eyes are replaced by tiny mouths. He speaks with a voice of the Legion. He's horrified by what he's done to himself. And so is Darwin. And so am I, honestly, every single time I see it. And when Gumball starts crying, or drooling, neither he nor Darwin can tell which, there's a moment where the comedy and the horror are so perfectly balanced that you can't tell if you're supposed to laugh or recoil. And I think the answer is both. I think the show wants both reactions simultaneously. That's something Gumball does better than almost any show I can think of. The comedy and the horror don't alternate, they coexist. The funny thing is the horrible thing. The joke is the nightmare. And the show never breaks character to tell you which reaction is correct. It trusts you to hold both at once. I want to spend some time on the specific ways the show uses its animation style to enhance the darkness, because I think this is one of the most technically impressive things Gumball does, and it goes almost completely unremarked upon. Gumball's world is made of colliding realities. You have 2D animated characters walking through photographed real-world backgrounds. You have 3D rendered characters interacting with hand-drawn ones. You have stop-motion elements, pixel art sequences, anime-style action scenes, live-action footage, puppet segments, and claymation, sometimes multiple styles in the same shot. In the comedy episodes, this creates visual chaos and energy. In the dark episodes, it creates wrongness. When the show wants you to feel unsettled, it uses the collision of styles to make the world feel fundamentally unstable. In the downer, as Gumball walks through the empty Elmore, the photographic backgrounds that normally feel like a quirky stylistic choice suddenly feel sinister. These are real places, real streets, real buildings. And there's a cartoon cat walking through them, alone. And the juxtaposition between the flat, stylized character and the three-dimensional, detailed reality around him makes him look small, vulnerable, like he doesn't belong in this world, and the world knows it. Compare this to a show like Gravity Falls or Adventure Time, where the darkness happens inside a consistent visual style. When those shows go dark, the world looks the same. It's the events that change. When Gumball goes dark, the world itself looks wrong. The photographic backgrounds become threatening. The 3D elements cast shadows that the 2D characters don't. The different animation styles, which normally coexist in cheerful harmony, start to feel like they're competing, like the world is being pulled apart at the seams. I think this is one of the reasons the Joy virus is so effective. The infected characters have their eyes darkened and their mouths dripping with rainbow fluid. But the real horror is in how those changes interact with the photographic backgrounds. A hand-drawn character with pitch-black eyes standing in a photographed school hallway creates an uncanny valley effect that pure animation couldn't achieve. The character looks wrong in the space, like a glitch, like something that's broken the rules of how this world is supposed to work. And speaking of breaking rules, I haven't talked about the game yet. Season 2, Episode 16. This is an episode about a board game called Dodge or Dar, a parody of Truth or Dare that functions as a genuine artifact of doom. The game warps reality around the players. The cards force them into increasingly dangerous situations. One card literally prevents all players from breathing for the remainder of the game. Let me say that again. A board game card prevents children from breathing, and the only way to lift the restriction is to finish the game. The whole episode becomes a race against suffocation, and the show plays this straight. There are no easy solutions, no clever workarounds. The characters are gasping, struggling, turning blue, and the game, this smiling, colorful, innocuous-looking board game, is just sitting there, waiting for them to make their next move. What gets me about the game is how it uses childhood nostalgia as a weapon. Board games are safe. Board games are what you play with your family on a rainy Sunday. They're comforting and familiar, and absolutely 100% harmless. And the show takes that familiarity and corrupts it. The game isn't just dangerous, it's tempting. When Gumball and Darwin first retrieve it from under the bed, they already know it's dangerous. They've played it before. It almost killed them before. But the game wordlessly tempts them into playing again, and they give in. Because the allure of the game is stronger than the memory of the harm. If you want to read a metaphor into that, about addiction, about returning to things that hurt you because the pull is too strong, the show gives you plenty of room to do so. But it also works as a straight horror story about an evil board game. And I think that dual functionality is peak Gumball. I also want to touch on the Halloween episodes, because the show has a genuinely interesting approach to its seasonal horror content. Halloween, Season 2, Episode 26, features ghosts possessing Gumball and Darwin's bodies and using them as meat puppets. The ghosts literally control the children's lifeless bodies, moving them around like dolls while Anais watches in horror. It's played for comedy, sure. But if you strip away the cartoon context and describe what's actually happening, two children's bodies being controlled by malevolent spirits while their sister watches helplessly, it's a scenario that would be disturbing in any horror film. And The Ghouls, Season 6, Episode 8, takes this further. The ghouls of Elmore have become domesticated, defanged by a world that's no longer scared of them. Mr. Candy, a ghoul, works as a masseuse now. The horror has been commercialized, turned into service industry labor. And when Carrie casts a spell to restore the ghoul's ability to frighten, it works too well. The world becomes genuinely terrifying. The clown at the end, that clown, popping up in the final frame, is one of the most effective jump scares in the show's history because it comes after an episode that spent most of its runtime arguing that horror isn't scary anymore. The meta-commentary there is sharp. The show is saying, you think you're desensitized to horror? You think you've seen everything? Let me remind you what actual fear feels like. And the clown, which is visually a pretty standard scary clown, works because the show has spent 11 minutes convincing you that nothing scary is going to happen. Your guard is down, and then it's there, and you feel it. Let me also talk about something I've been circling around for a while, which is the show's depiction of isolation. Because Gumball uses loneliness as a horror element more effectively than almost any show I can think of. The Nobody, Season 3, Episode 36, introduces Rob as a character who has been fundamentally alone. Not temporarily alone, not story arc alone, existentially alone. He was erased from the memories of everyone who ever knew him. He spent an unknowable amount of time in the void, which is a dimension of infinite static where nothing exists and nothing matters. And when he escaped, he came back broken, his body glitched, his face half-rendered, his animation style corrupted. He's a walking visual reminder of what isolation does to a person. I know we talked about Rob in the fan theories video, and I don't want to retread that ground, but there's an aspect of Rob's story that fits specifically into the dark side discussion, which is this. Rob's villainy isn't really villainy. It's loneliness performing rage. He doesn't want to destroy Gumball. He wants to be noticed by Gumball. He wants to matter to someone, anyone. And the only toolkit he has for mattering is antagonism, because that's the only role the narrative gave him. He's not a villain. He's a lonely kid who's been told the only way to get attention is to be a problem. That's dark not because it's scary, but because it's true. There are real children, real, actual human children watching the show who recognize that dynamic, who know what it's like to act out, because acting out is the only way anyone looks at them, and the show sees them. The show is saying, I know why you're doing it, and it's not because you're bad. Okay, I need to talk about The Puppets, Season 5, Episode 36, the season finale, because it's the most explicit intersection of Gumball's darkness and the wider landscape of alternative animation, and it doesn't get enough attention for what it actually is. This episode was a collaboration with Becky Sloan and Joseph Pelling, the creators of Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared. If you don't know what that is, it's a web series, later a TV show, that uses felt puppets and bright colors to create some of the most psychologically disturbing content on the internet. It starts as something that looks like Sesame Street and slowly deteriorates into surreal, body horror-infused nightmares. It's brilliant and upsetting in roughly equal measure. Gumball invited those people to make an episode. A kids show looked at the creators of some of the most horrifying puppet content ever produced and said, yeah, come do your thing here. And they did. The setup is that Gumball and Darwin find old puppet toys in the attic. Frank, Howdy, and Grady. Darwin becomes attached to them, increasingly, weirdly, unhealthily attached. He starts wearing them on his hands everywhere. He starts talking through them. And then, in the episode's final act, Gumball is pulled into a puppet world. The actual animation shifts to real puppets, built and filmed in the same style as Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared. Gumball and Darwin become puppets themselves, and the toys start to get revenge for being abandoned. The puppet segment took 3 months to produce. It was shown at the Annecy Festival, before it even aired on television, and it's the closest Gumball ever gets to genuine horror in terms of form. The felt textures, the fixed smiles of the puppets, the sinister song with deliberately unsettling lyrics. We have fun all day long, it says so on the clock. So wear hat, or wear no hat, or wear 2 hats if you prefer. It all creates this atmosphere of enforced cheerfulness that curdles into something threatening. The fun isn't fun. The smiles aren't smiles. And underneath the bright colors, someone is being hurt. There's a detail in this episode that I think most people miss. When Gumball enters the puppet world, there's a character called the Tree of Permanent Happiness. It's a smiling tree, and it whispers, I wish I could feel other things. That's it. One line. A background character in a puppet sequence. But it crystallizes everything Gumball has ever said about forced positivity. The Tree of Permanent Happiness is permanently happy, and it's miserable about it. It exists in a world designed for fun, and it's suffering. And nobody in the puppet world acknowledges this, because the puppet world doesn't allow negative emotions to exist. This is the safety taken to its extreme. This is the joy in puppet form. This is the same argument the show keeps making over and over. Forced happiness is a form of violence. Taking away someone's ability to feel negative emotions doesn't make them happy. It makes them hollow. And hollowness, in this show's vocabulary, is the darkest thing of all. Let me talk about death for a minute, because Gumball has a very specific and very uncomfortable relationship with death that I don't think any other kids show has attempted. Characters in Gumball die frequently. In most cartoons, this would be a non-issue. Characters get flattened by anvils and bounce back. They fall off cliffs and appear unharmed in the next scene. Cartoon physics protect them. But Gumball occupies this weird middle ground where cartoon physics are acknowledged as a system that exists, and the show repeatedly asks what happens when that system fails. In the finale, the one we already discussed, Gumball explicitly references the reset that happens at the end of every episode. He knows about it. He relies on it. It's what keeps the show functional. But the finale asks, what if it stops working? What if the cartoon physics that prevent consequences suddenly allow consequences? And the answer is, everyone comes for you. Every bone you broke, every car you crashed, every building you destroyed, all of it comes back. All of it matters. And you can't hide behind, it's just a cartoon anymore. This theme intensifies across the later seasons. In The Countdown, Season 3, Episode 15, Gumball and Darwin are racing to get to school on time, and they accidentally break the show's countdown clock. Time starts behaving erratically. They experience what appears to be the heat death of a universe. They witness the birth of a new one. They end up in a world where everyone blinks vertically. The episode plays this for comedy, but underneath the comedy is a genuine reckoning with temporal annihilation. Gumball and Darwin, for a moment, experience non-existence, and the show doesn't give them a clean way back. They end up in a wrong universe. The reset is imperfect. Something is permanently off. And then there's the food characters. Oh God, the food characters. This is one of those things that I think Gumball has the darkest time with, and it's rarely discussed because it's presented so casually. Elmore is populated by food characters. Banana Joe, Anton the Toast, the Hamburger Cop, Idaho the Potato, the Hot Dog Guy. These are sentient beings made of edible material, living in a world populated by entities that eat. The show acknowledges this. It doesn't ignore the horror. It leans into it. In the finale, a couple made of pizza watches in horror as Gumball murders their child in front of them. Their child is a pizza. Gumball is eating it. He's eating someone's child while the parents watch. The show frames this as a consequence, one of many destructive acts the Wattersons need to answer for. But the scene is shot from the pizza couple's perspective, and their faces show genuine anguish. It's not played for laughs, or rather, it is played for laughs. But the laugh catches in your throat because the show has made you see this moment through the eyes of the victim. And it gets worse. Anton the Toast dies in almost every episode he appears in and is regenerated via toaster. The show treats this as a running gag. But the recipe, if I remember correctly, that's in Season 3, takes this premise and pushes it to its logical extreme. Gumball and Darwin discover how to clone Anton. They make hundreds of clones, and the clones start dying repeatedly. And each death is treated with increasing casualness by the characters until the act of creating and destroying sentient life becomes routine. That is a show about the devaluation of life through familiarity. The more Antons there are, the less each one matters. The more deaths you witness, the less death means. And the show is showing this to you while making you laugh, which means it's making you complicit. In the very process, it's critiquing. You're laughing at Anton's death. And by laughing, you're proving the show's point. I want to push on the food character thing a bit more, because I think there's a whole layer here that people don't talk about. The food characters in Gumball exist in a constant state of existential vulnerability that no other character type shares. Banana Joe can be peeled. Anton can be eaten. Idaho could be boiled. The Hot Dog Guy. I don't even want to think about what could happen to the Hot Dog Guy. They live in a world full of potential predators. Every citizen of Elmore who has a mouth is, technically, a threat to their existence. And the show plays with this in ways that range from playful to genuinely disturbing. There's a recurring thread about the moral implications of eating in a world where food is sentient. When the Wattersons order pizza, they're placing an order that will result in the creation and delivery of a sentient being whose purpose is to be consumed. When Gumball eats a sandwich, is that sandwich related to someone at his school? When Richard opens the fridge, are the contents in there screaming? The show mostly avoids these questions, but the fact that it raises them at all, and it does, occasionally, with devastating casualness, creates this background hum of ethical horror that you can never quite shake. Elmore is a world where some people are food, and some people eat food, and everyone just sort of agrees not to think about it too hard. Which is, if you think about it, not that different from our world. We just draw the lines in different places. And look, I know I'm reading a lot into what is, on one level, a series of sight gags about toast getting burned. But that's the Gumball effect. The show invites you to read deeply. It puts just enough weight behind its absurd premises that you can't help but take them seriously. And once you start taking them seriously, the implications are staggering. I need a minute with this one. Okay, this is going to be one of my tangents, but I think it's earned. I've been making these videos about Gumball for a while now, and every time I go deeper into the show, I find another layer I wasn't expecting. And this layer, the food character thing, hit me harder than I thought it would, because it's not really about food characters, is it? It's about how we categorize some forms of life as expendable, about how we decide, based on what something looks like or what it's made of, whether its death matters. Anton is made of toast. So his deaths are funny. If he were made of the same material as Gumball, if he were a cat, or a dog, or something the audience instinctively empathizes with, his constant deaths would be a horror story. The only thing that makes Anton's suffering acceptable is that he looks like breakfast. And that's something. That's the show holding up a mirror and saying, look at what you're willing to laugh at. Look at which lives you consider disposable. Anyway, moving on. Here's where the video takes a turn. Because up to this point, I've been cataloging the dark moments, the horror episodes, the uncomfortable themes. I've been building a case that Gumball is darker than people give it credit for, and all of that is true. But here's the thing I realized while putting this together, and it's the thing that changed how I think about the show entirely. The darkness isn't the point. The darkness is the setup. Every dark moment in Gumball exists to make the light moments more meaningful. The show isn't dark for shock value or edge. The show is dark because it understands something that most kids' shows don't. Warmth means nothing if it's never threatened. Love means nothing if loss isn't real. Family means nothing if you never feel what it would be like to lose one. The downer puts Gumball through an hallucinatory, depressive episode. But the resolution, Darwin appearing, the family returning, is one of the warmest moments in the series. The darkness makes the warmth possible. You can't feel the relief of the family coming back if you didn't genuinely fear they were gone. The joy shows you what forced happiness looks like. And by showing you the horror of fake joy, it makes the show's genuine moments of happiness, the little victories, the family dinners, the stupid jokes that make Gumball and Darwin laugh so hard they fall over, feel real, feel earned. You know what fake happiness looks like now. So when you see the real thing, you recognize it. The safety builds a surveillance state. But the episode doesn't end with a grand political statement. It ends with the family taking back their autonomy, with Darwin learning that you can't protect people by controlling them, with the simple truth that a dangerous world full of genuine feelings is better than a safe world full of censored ones. The darkness, the authoritarian control, the loss of freedom makes the return to messy, unsafe, unfiltered life feel like a victory. And the puppets, God, the puppets, uses its horror to make a point about growing up. The whole episode is about Gumball and Darwin's childhood toys coming back to haunt them. The puppets don't want revenge for being abandoned. They want the boys to stay children forever. They want to keep playing, keep pretending, keep existing in the safe imaginary world where nothing hurts and everything is fun. The horror of the puppet world isn't that it's dangerous, it's that it's tempting. It's that part of you, part of every person who's ever grown up, wants to stay in the puppet world, wants to keep wearing the hat and eating the felt cake and never, ever confronting the complicated reality of adolescence and adulthood and loss. And Darwin defeats the puppets by pulling a thread, by literally unraveling the fantasy, by choosing the messy, uncertain real world over the controlled, eternal puppet world. And that's not just a plot resolution. That's the show's entire philosophy in one gesture. Growing up means pulling the thread. Growing up means accepting that the puppet world isn't real, even if it's comfortable. Growing up means choosing the darkness, because the darkness is where the real light lives. There's an episode I haven't mentioned yet that I think perfectly encapsulates this idea. The Night, Season 5, Episode 22, is an episode about what happens in Elmore while everyone is sleeping. The show cuts between different characters' dreams, and what it reveals is extraordinary. These characters, these goofy, slapstick, seemingly one-dimensional cartoon characters, have inner lives that are vast and strange, and sometimes heartbreaking. Darwin dreams about the ocean. He dreams about being a fish again, about the water he came from, about the life he left behind when he grew legs and joined the Wattersons. His dream isn't a nightmare. It's a longing. It's the quiet, persistent ache of someone who chose a new life and doesn't regret it, but still, sometimes, in the deepest part of the night, misses what he used to be. Banana Joe dreams about being enormous, about towering over Elmore, about being impossible to ignore. And if you remember what we said earlier about the food characters and their vulnerability, about how Banana Joe exists in a world where his body is literally edible, his dream makes perfect sense. He dreams about being big because he spends his waking life feeling small, feeling consumable, feeling like he could be peeled and eaten and nobody would care. His dream is a fantasy of invulnerability, and it's coming from a character we've spent the whole show laughing at. The show doesn't ask you to feel sorry for Banana Joe. It doesn't make a big deal out of his dream. It just shows it to you and moves on. But once you've seen it, you can't unsee it. The next time Banana Joe appears in a comedy episode, doing something silly, you'll remember what he dreams about, and the comedy will feel different, not less funny, just deeper, more layered, more human. That's what the darkness buys the show, not shock value, depth. I want to circle back to something I said earlier about the show escalating its darkness season by season, because I think it's worth tracing that escalation more specifically. In Season 1, the darkness is mostly cosmetic. There are creepy moments, Miss Simeon's age, the evil turtle, the generally unsettling visual design of some background characters. But the show is still finding its tone. The darkness is there, but it hasn't learned how to weaponize itself yet. Season 2 is where things shift. The Flower shows the show is willing to depict genuine violence between characters. The finale shows it's willing to question its own format. The Halloween special shows it can do genre horror. By the end of Season 2, the foundations are laid. Season 3 is the breakthrough, the joy, the downer, the safety, the oracle, the void. Season 3 is when the show discovers that its mixed media animation style isn't just a visual gimmick, it's a horror tool. The photographic backgrounds can be used to create eeriness. The different animation styles can be used to create wrongness. The meta-awareness can be used to create existential dread. Everything that makes Gumball visually unique also makes it uniquely suited for darkness. And Season 3 is when the show figures that out. Seasons 4 and 5 refine the approach. The Disaster and The Rerun are the show at the height of its narrative ambition. A two-part story that breaks reality, sends characters into the void, and plays with the mechanics of the show itself as plot devices. The Puppets brings in external collaborators to push the darkness in new directions. These seasons are more confident, more precise, more willing to let the darkness breathe, rather than rushing to relieve it with comedy. And Season 6 goes all in. The Faith makes a balloon's depression turn the world gray. The Revolt gives objects consciousness and lets them rage against their exploitation. And The Inquisition transforms the entire cast into realistic humans in what amounts to an animated extinction event. The death of the show's visual identity, rendered on screen in real time. The escalation isn't accidental. It's the show growing up alongside its audience. The kids who watched Season 1 at age 7 are watching Season 6 at age 12. Their capacity for complexity has grown. Their tolerance for darkness has expanded. And the show meets them where they are, getting deeper and darker and more honest as its audience matures. That's not lazy boundary pushing. That's responsible storytelling. And you can see this in the craft, too. The early dark moments, Season 1 and 2, tend to be isolated. They're dark scenes within otherwise normal episodes. A creepy moment here, an uncomfortable joke there. By Season 3, the darkness starts shaping entire episodes. The Joy isn't an episode with a dark scene. It's an entirely dark episode. The Downer isn't a comedy that gets serious for a minute. It's an exploration of depression that happens to be in a comedy's body. The darkness has gone from decoration to architecture. By Seasons 5 and 6, the darkness is structural. The Puppets changes the show's animation style to deliver its horror. The Inquisition changes the show's character designs. The darkness isn't something that happens within the show's format anymore. It's something that happens to the show's format. The show is consuming its own identity, using its established conventions as raw material for new kinds of discomfort. And the only reason it can do this, the only reason it works, is that the audience has spent 5 seasons learning to trust the show's ability to go dark without losing its soul. That trust is everything. Without it, the Inquisition is just a gimmick. With it, it's devastating, because you've spent 6 seasons falling in love with these characters' cartoon forms. You've grown attached to Gumball's 2D expressiveness, to Darwin's simplified design, to the visual chaos of Elmore's clashing animation styles. And when the superintendent starts turning everyone realistic, you feel the loss. Not because realism is bad, but because these specific characters, in these specific forms, are yours. They're the versions you know, and watching them get erased and replaced by something generic and uniform feels like watching a beloved city get bulldozed for a parking lot. That's the power of accumulated darkness. It builds on itself. Each dark moment gives the next one more weight, because you know the show is willing to follow through. You know the threat is real. And so each new escalation lands harder, because your defenses are down, because the show has earned the right to hurt you. I think this is the key to understanding Gumball's darkness, and it's something that connects to what we talked about in the philosophy video, but from a completely different angle. Gumball is a show that believes in love, genuinely, embarrassingly, without irony, believes that love matters, and family matters, and connection matters. But it also knows that in order for you to believe it too, in order for a cynical, meme-literate, irony-poisoned audience to actually feel something, the show has to earn it. And the only way to earn warmth in a world that defaults to cynicism is to go dark first, to show you the alternative, to make you feel the cold so that when the warmth comes, you open your arms to it instead of rolling your eyes. That's why the finale works. Not because the mob attacking the Wattersons is scary, though it is, but because after an entire episode of consequences and destruction, the thing you want more than anything is for the reset to happen. You want the status quo. You want the cartoon logic to kick in and save this family. And by making you want it, the show has made you care about these characters in a way that a straightforward comedy episode never could. Let me talk about Nicole for a moment. I know we covered her backstory in the Character Secrets video, but tonight, I want to focus on something different, her anger. Because Nicole's anger might be the darkest element of the entire show, and it's treated with a complexity that I've never seen in any other animated series aimed at children. Nicole Watterson is, by several episodes' testimony, the most dangerous person in Elmore. Her physical power is treated as a force of nature. She can destroy walls, flip cars, terrify Tina Rex, and, in the limit, transform into something that is explicitly compared to a monster. Her eyes go white. Her body language shifts from human to predatory. And she pursues her children through a supermarket like something out of a survival horror game. But the show doesn't just play Nicole's anger for spectacle, it contextualizes it. We know from the choices and from scattered references throughout the series that Nicole's childhood was difficult. We know her parents were neglectful at best and cruel at worst. We know she shouldered responsibility from an impossibly young age. We know she chose Richard, chose the path of harder work, less recognition, more sacrifice, because she loved someone who was kind. Nicole's anger isn't a character flaw, it's a scar. It's the accumulated weight of a woman who has spent her entire adult life keeping a family afloat on not enough money, with a husband who can't work, in a world that doesn't appreciate her, while burying a childhood of pain so deep that it only surfaces as explosive rage. And the show presents this without judgment. Nicole's anger is terrifying and justified. It's destructive and understandable. The show never tells you it's okay, but it also never tells you it's her fault. In The Fridge, Season 2, Episode 10, if I recall, Nicole pushes Gumball too hard. She becomes so focused on making him competitive, on making him strong enough to survive the kind of world she grew up in, that she forgets he's a child. She runs him through increasingly brutal challenges. She leaves him in a desert. She pushes until the lesson stops being about resilience and starts being about cruelty. And the episode knows this. It doesn't let Nicole off the hook. It shows the hurt in Gumball's eyes. It shows the moment where Nicole's tough love crosses the line into something darker, but it also shows where it comes from. Nicole's harshness with Gumball isn't random. It's the echo of her own upbringing, the cycle of trauma repeating itself through a parent who swore she'd be different and couldn't quite manage it. And that's dark. That's really, really dark. Because it's real. It's not cartoon dark. It's, my mother used to do this to me, and now I'm doing it to my son, dark. It's generational trauma, animated in primary colors, and aired between cereal commercials. And the show doesn't stop there. Nicole's anger has physical consequences that the show renders with unsettling specificity. In The Limit, Season 2, Episode 19, Nicole transforms during a supermarket trip. The kids keep pushing. They keep asking for things, whining, demanding. And Nicole's patience doesn't just run out, it disintegrates. Her eyes go white. Her movements become predatory. She chases her own children through the aisles of a grocery store, like a creature in a survival horror game. The other shoppers flee. Shelves topple. The store becomes a war zone. And here's the detail that gets me every time. The kids aren't surprised. Not really. They're scared, yes. They run, yes. But there's a familiarity to their terror. They've seen this before. They know the signs. They know when mom is about to cross the line, and they have escape strategies ready. That's not a family experiencing a surprising event. That's a family managing a recurring crisis. That's children who have learned, through experience, how to survive their own mother's rage. I'm not saying Nicole is abusive. I'm not interested in that debate. What I'm saying is that the show depicts a family dynamic that millions of real families recognize. One where love and fear coexist. Where the person who protects you is also the person you're most afraid of. Where you can simultaneously adore your parent and dread their worst moments. And the show presents this without judgment or moralizing. It just shows it and trusts the audience to feel the complexity. In The Castle, Season 2, Episode 28, Nicole's fury is directed outward. The Wattersons' house is invaded by opportunistic townsfolk, and Nicole goes full action hero. She fights them off with a ferocity that's played for comedy. The anime-style fight sequences, the slow-motion impacts. But the subtext is clear. Nicole is not just protecting her home. She's channeling decades of repressed rage into socially acceptable violence. The invaders give her permission to unleash, and unleash she does. There's a reading of Nicole Watterson where her entire character is a study in containment. She contains her childhood pain. She contains her frustration with Richard. She contains her anger at a world that doesn't value her. She contains, and occasionally, spectacularly, she fails. And those failures are both the funniest and the most frightening moments in the show, because they remind you that underneath every composed, functioning adult is a pressure system that could blow at any moment. And in Nicole's case, when it blows big. I want to talk about the adult content now. Not the horror, not the existential stuff. The actually adult adults only get this content that the show smuggles past the censors with such remarkable efficiency that it almost feels like a separate show running underneath the one kids are watching. Banana Joe, Season 1. There's a scene where Gumball barges into Banana Joe's room and finds him at his computer. He's caught looking at something, and that something is a video of peeled fruit. Banana Joe is a banana. His peel is his clothing. He is watching naked fruit. The show just did that on a children's network. And the thing is, a kid watching this would just see a weird joke about fruit, but an adult watching this recognizes exactly what the scene is parodying. Every element is there. The embarrassment, the hasty attempt to close the browser, the awkward eye contact. It's a perfect reproduction of a very specific adult scenario, translated through the show's absurdist filter until it's technically appropriate for a 7-year-old, while being unmistakably inappropriate for the audience that actually understands it. This is the Gumball magic trick. The show operates on 2 simultaneous frequencies. On the kids' frequency, it's colorful and silly and fun. On the adult frequency, it's something else entirely. And the beauty of it is that neither frequency interferes with the other. The kids get their show, the adults get theirs, and the 2 versions coexist in the same 11 minutes without ever breaking. The Robinson marriage is another example. Mr. Robinson describes to Gumball how he and Margaret used to love to argue. They'd argue in the morning, argue before bed, argue in the car, argue 6 times a day. Kids here argue. Adults hear something very different. And both interpretations are valid, and neither undermines the other. And the show just sits there with this serene little smirk on its face, like it has no idea what it's done. And then there's Mr. Small, the school counselor, the hippie, who drinks herbal tea that makes his eyes go weird, and his face go slack, and his general demeanor shift from New Age guru to someone who is, to put it delicately, having a very good time. The show never says what's in Mr. Small's tea. It doesn't need to. The visual storytelling does all the work. And again, kids see a silly character acting goofy. Adults see a very different show. I could list these forever. The censorship bar that, when removed, reveals Gumball has nothing underneath. The moment Alan the balloon deflates after a breakup, and Gumball has to, re-inflate him in the school bathroom. Sarah's stalker video about Gumball and Darwin that would, as the show itself implies, not be out of place in a police evidence locker. The internet episode where Darwin's browser history causes the entire family to panic and destroy their devices. But I think the more interesting question isn't how do they get away with it? It's why does it work? And I think the answer is this. The adult content in Gumball works because it's never gratuitous. It's never there just to be edgy. Every adult joke serves the same purpose as the horror and the existential darkness. It makes the world feel real. Elmore feels like a real place because it contains the full spectrum of human experience, including the parts we don't normally show children. The fact that Banana Joe has private browser habits, and Mr. Robinson has a love life, and Mr. Small self-medicates, these details don't corrupt the show. They ground it. They make Elmore feel like a place where real people live real lives, even if those people are made of construction paper and living on top of photographs. I want to dig into this a bit more because I think there's something really important happening with how the show handles its adult content versus how other shows handle theirs. A lot of animated comedies, your Family Guys, your South Parks, use adult content as the point. The joke is the inappropriateness. The humor comes from the shock of seeing something you're not supposed to see. And that's fine. That's a valid approach. But it means the adult content is always the destination. You're always arriving at the joke. Gumball does something different. In Gumball, the adult content is texture. It's wallpaper. It's the stuff happening in the background that you notice or you don't, that changes the flavor of the scene without demanding to be the center of attention. The Robinson marriage joke isn't the punchline of an episode about marriage. It's a throwaway moment in an episode about something else entirely. The Banana Joe scene is 30 seconds long. Mr. Small's herbal tea is a running detail, not a running joke. The show trusts that the adult content will land for the people who get it and pass harmlessly over the people who don't. It never turns around and winks at the camera. It never pauses to let you appreciate how clever it's being. And that restraint, that willingness to let the adult content exist without performing its own cleverness, is what makes it so effective, because it means the world of Elmore has depth you discover, rather than depth that's presented to you. Every rewatch reveals something new, a detail you missed, an implication you didn't catch, a visual gag that sailed over your head the first time, and now, as an adult, makes you choke on your drink. I actually think this is one of the reasons Gumball has such a dedicated adult fan base. It's not that the show is secretly for adults. It's that the show respects adults enough to hide things in it that only they'll find. It makes you feel like an archaeologist, like you're discovering buried treasure in a place nobody thought to dig. And that feeling, the feeling of finding something unexpected and something familiar, is addictive. It's why people rewatch this show obsessively. It's why the fan community is so active even years after the original run ended. Every episode is a puzzle with multiple solutions, and the more you know, the more you see. There's a moment in The Roots, Season 4, Episode 7, If Memory Serves, where Nicole discovers Darwin's browser history and the entire family panics. They start destroying their devices, smashing phones, breaking tablets. The scene is pure comedy on the surface. It's the physical escalation, the absurdity of the destruction. But underneath, it's a perfectly observed portrait of modern family anxiety about digital privacy. Every parent watching this knows the fear. Every teenager watching this knows the guilt. And every kid watching this is just enjoying the sight of a family smashing their own technology, oblivious to the deeper resonance. The show operates on all three levels simultaneously without privileging any of them. That's craftsmanship. Let me also mention something about the show's approach to romance that I think contributes to its darkness in ways people don't usually discuss. Gumball and Penny's relationship is, for the most part, sweet and genuine. But the show doesn't shy away from the uglier aspects of adolescent romance. In The Shell, when Penny's true form is revealed, Gumball's reaction is beautiful. He accepts her completely, regardless of what she looks like. But before that acceptance, there are moments of genuine fear. Penny's unstable form is frightening. She transforms into things that are objectively scary. A dragon, a Medusa-like figure, a cloud of darkness. The show is saying that vulnerability is terrifying, that letting someone see who you really are carries genuine risk, and that love doesn't make that risk go away. It just makes the risk worth taking. And in The Bros, Season 4, Episode 26, Darwin gets jealous of Gumball's relationship with Penny. Not in a funny sitcom jealousy way, in a way that feels uncomfortably real. Darwin has been Gumball's best friend, his brother, his constant companion for the entire series. And now, someone else is taking up Gumball's attention. And Darwin doesn't handle it well. The episode explores the very real, very painful experience of feeling replaced by your best friend's romantic partner. And for a kids show, it handles this with remarkable nuance, acknowledging both Darwin's pain and Gumball's right to have a life that isn't entirely about Darwin. These aren't dark in the horror movie sense, but they're dark in the human sense. They're the darkness of ordinary emotional experience. Jealousy, fear of abandonment, the terror of vulnerability, the pain of growing up and watching your relationships change. And I think this kind of darkness is, in some ways, more important than the horror movie kind. Because kids will probably never encounter a joy virus or a surveillance state, but they will absolutely encounter the fear of being replaced. They will feel the pain of watching a friend move on. And Gumball takes those feelings seriously enough to show them, even when they're uncomfortable, even when they don't have easy solutions. And here's the thought I want to leave in the middle of this video. Before we enter the second half, I want you to hold on to this thought, because I think it's the key to everything we've been talking about. The darkness of Gumball, all of it, the horror, and the body horror, and the adult content, and the existential dread, and the family dysfunction, and the authoritarian commentary, and the food character genocide, all of it serves a single purpose. It teaches children that the world is complicated. Most kids' shows present a simplified world. Problems are solvable. Villains are evil. Heroes are good. Every episode ends with a lesson, and the lesson is always clean and easy to understand. Be kind. Share your toys. Tell the truth. Gumball says, yeah, but also, sometimes the truth is ugly. Sometimes kindness isn't enough. Sometimes the people who love you hurt you, not because they're bad, but because they're broken. Sometimes you'll be scared and alone, and there won't be a rescue. Sometimes the happy ending is a lie, and the only honest ending is the one that acknowledges the mess. That's not pessimism, that's preparation. The show is preparing children for reality by showing them a version of reality that's been filtered through cartoon logic, but not sanitized. It's saying, the world has dark corners. You should know about them, because knowing about them is how you learn to navigate them without getting lost. So with that framework in mind, let me take you through the second half of this video, where we look at the ways the show uses its darkness, not just to shock or unsettle, but to say something genuine about what it means to be alive, something that most kids' shows wouldn't dare touch. Let's talk about The Others, Season 4, Episode 4, because it's one of those episodes that sits quietly in the middle of the series and does something revolutionary without anyone noticing. The episode follows Claire Cooper, a background character, as she goes through what the show describes as a real show. Claire's parents are divorcing. She's moving to a new school. She's dealing with genuine, messy, unresolvable emotional pain. And Gumball keeps trying to inject himself into her story because he's the main character and he thinks every story is supposed to revolve around him. The genius of The Others is that it uses Gumball's narcissism to expose the structural narcissism of the sitcom format itself. Gumball literally cannot understand why Claire's problems don't have funny solutions. He keeps trying to turn her divorce into a comedy bit, and it keeps failing because some things aren't funny. Some pain can't be turned into a punchline. And Claire looks at Gumball with this expression that I think about a lot. This weary, slightly contemptuous expression that says, not everything is your show. The episode ends with Claire leaving. Her story isn't resolved. Her parents are still divorcing. She's still sad. And Gumball, for once, has to just stand there and accept that he can't fix this. That some problems exist outside his narrative jurisdiction. That the world is full of people whose suffering is real and private and not available for him to turn into content. If you're listening to this late at night, I want you to sit with that for a second. A kids show made an episode about how the main character of a kids show can't fix everything, about how some pain is too real for comedy, about how the very format of entertainment, the need for resolution, the demand for a happy ending, can be a form of violence against the people whose stories don't fit. I want to spend some time on a few more episodes that contribute to this picture, because the density of dark content in this show is genuinely remarkable once you start looking for it. The Fan, Season 3, Episode 2, is an episode about Sarah, the ice cream girl, and her obsession with Gumball and Darwin. On the surface, it's a comedy about an annoying fan, but the episode reveals that Sarah has been stalking them. She's been filming them. She has footage of Gumball undressing. She has footage of Darwin getting out of the shower. She's made a video set to music about how she wants to marry one of them. The show directly compares her behavior to a police evidence file. And here's the thing, Sarah is a child. She's a kid with an unhealthy fixation. And the show doesn't shy away from how disturbing that fixation is. It shows the surveillance, the obsessive documentation, the complete erosion of boundaries. It's a children's cartoon about stalking, and it treats the subject with enough weight that an adult watching would feel genuine unease. The fact that Sarah is also comedically endearing, she's sweet and enthusiastic and made of ice cream, is part of the discomfort. The stalker is adorable, and that doesn't make it okay. The show knows it doesn't make it okay. Then there's The Nest, Season 5, Episode 28, where the evil turtle from way back in Season 2 returns with an army of babies. And I know that sounds goofy, but the episode is structured as a genuine alien invasion film. The turtles are small, relentless, and frightening in large numbers. There's a sequence where they swarm through Elmore that genuinely evokes classic horror movie imagery. The slow, unstoppable advance. The characters barricading themselves inside buildings. The dawning realization that there are too many to fight. I want to take a detour here into something I haven't heard anyone discuss in this context. The show has a really interesting relationship with the concept of suppression. The idea that certain characters have to be kept small, kept quiet, kept contained, because the alternative is catastrophic. And the darkness of this isn't in the containment itself. It's in what the containment implies about the world. Hector is the biggest example. Literally, he's a giant. His mother, Mrs. Jotunheim, the witch, spends her entire life keeping Hector calm, keeping him level-headed, keeping him from feeling his feelings. And in The Colossus, Season 2, Episode 1, Gumball convinces Hector to express himself freely, to let his emotions out, to be authentic, and it destroys the town. Hector's genuine emotional expression causes physical devastation. His feelings, when uncontained, are literally destructive, and his mother was right all along. Keeping him suppressed wasn't cruelty, it was civic engineering. The world cannot survive Hector's authentic self. Think about what that says. Think about what it means for a character to exist in a world where their genuine emotions are an existential threat to everyone around them, where the only responsible thing to do is to feel less, to be smaller, to contain yourself so thoroughly that nobody ever sees who you really are, because who you really are could kill people. That's a metaphor for a lot of things. For neurodivergent kids who've been told to calm down. For angry kids who've been told their feelings are too much. For anyone who's ever been made to feel that their authentic self is too big, too loud, too dangerous for the space they've been given. And the show doesn't pretend there's a clean solution. Hector's emotions are dangerous. Suppressing them is necessary, but it's also sad. It's also a loss. And the show holds both of those truths without choosing between them. Nicole has a version of this too, as we discussed. Her anger is destructive. Her containment is necessary. But the cost of that containment, the silent, grinding daily cost of being less than you are so that the people around you can be safe, is something the show refuses to trivialize. And in a quieter way, so does Darwin. In the safety, Darwin's instinct to protect, which is, at its core, a loving instinct, a generous instinct, becomes authoritarian when taken to its logical extreme. The show is saying that even good impulses, when suppressed or when given too much power, become dark. That the line between protection and control is thinner than we think. That the most well-intentioned person in the room can become the most dangerous one if nobody pushes back. These aren't the episodes that show up on darkest moments compilations. But I think they're doing some of the deepest, most genuinely uncomfortable work in the show. Because body horror fades, jump scares lose their power. But the idea that being yourself might be too dangerous for the world around you, that stays with you, that lives in your chest like a weight you can't quite name. And The Ape, Season 1, Episode 33, where Gumball and Darwin visit Miss Simeon's house and discover that she's profoundly, devastatingly lonely. Her home is a shrine to decades of isolation. She has no friends, no family, no relationships outside the school. The episode could play this purely for laughs, and it does get comedy mileage from the visual details. But there are moments where the loneliness is just present, undisguised, uncomedied. You look at Miss Simeon's empty house, and you feel something you don't expect to feel for a character you've spent the whole show disliking. That's the Gumball trick again. The show makes you empathize with people you thought you were supposed to laugh at. It refuses to let any character be purely a punchline. Even the most ridiculous, most villainous, most absurd citizens of Elmore get moments of genuine humanity. And those moments, precisely because they come from characters you've been trained to dismiss, hit harder than they would from the leads. I want to sit with Miss Simeon for a moment longer, because I think she's one of the most interesting vehicles for the show's darkness. Here's a character who is, by all accounts, terrible. She's a bad teacher. She's petty, vindictive, cruel. She's been alive for millions of years. The show literally established that she's been around since prehistoric times, and she's spent what appears to be most of that time making children miserable. On paper, she's easy to dismiss. She's the villain teacher archetype, a cartoon Miss Trunchbull with fewer redeeming qualities. But then you see her house, and it's empty, and it's been empty for a very long time. And the show doesn't spell it out for you, doesn't give you a monologue about loneliness, doesn't have Miss Simeon break down and reveal her tragic backstory. It just shows you the empty house, the absence of photographs, the furniture arranged for one person, and you fill in the rest yourself. 2 million years alone. Every student she's ever taught has grown up and forgotten her. Every colleague has come and gone. She's been at Elmore Junior High for longer than most civilizations have existed, and she has nothing to show for it except a fake diploma, which we learn about in The Fraud, Season 3, Episode 19, and a school building that she has more claim to than anyone living. Is that dark? I think it's the darkest thing the show has ever implied without explicitly stating, because it means Miss Simeon's cruelty isn't arbitrary. It's the defense mechanism of someone who has been alone for longer than any sentient being should be able to endure. She's mean because being mean keeps people at a distance, and keeping people at a distance means she doesn't have to watch them leave. Again, for the millionth time. Literally. The show doesn't ask you to forgive Miss Simeon. It doesn't excuse her behavior, but it gives you the information you need to understand it. And understanding, in this show's vocabulary, is always more valuable than judgment. There's a pattern here that I want to name explicitly, because I think it's one of the most sophisticated things Gumball does. The show gives you the comedy version of a character first. It lets you form your opinion. It lets you laugh at them, dismiss them, write them off. And then, sometimes hours of episodes later, sometimes seasons later, it gives you the detail that recontextualizes everything. The empty house, the fake diploma, the dream about being big, the loneliness that explains the cruelty. And suddenly the character you thought you knew is someone completely different, not redeemed, not fixed, just understood. That's how empathy works in real life. You don't start by understanding someone. You start by judging them. And then, if you're lucky, if you're paying attention, you get the piece of information that makes the judgment feel inadequate. The piece that makes you think, oh, there's more to this person than I realized. And the feeling you get in that moment, that uncomfortable, humbling, perspective-shifting feeling, is exactly what Gumball gives you when it reveals a character's hidden depth. This is, I think, one of the show's most important contributions to its audience. Not teaching kids what to feel. Every show does that. But teaching them how to feel. How to hold judgment and empathy simultaneously. How to laugh at someone and care about them at the same time. How to recognize that the person you think you understand might have an entire universe of pain hidden behind a comedy mask. Okay, I want to briefly touch on something that we haven't talked about yet, which is the show's occasional dips into genuine philosophical horror. And I don't mean the kind of philosophy we covered in the philosophy video, the structured thematic exploration of ideas like identity and free will. I mean the moments where the show asks a question so big that it destabilizes the ground under your feet. The Question, Season 3, Episode 28, is an episode where Gumball and Darwin go around Elmore asking people about the meaning of life. Standard enough premise. The responses are mostly comedic, but there's a thread running through the episode that's genuinely disquieting. Nobody has a good answer. Not one person in Elmore can articulate why they exist. And the more the boys ask, the more the question starts to infect the people they're asking. Larry, the guy who holds Elmore together, has an existential crisis so severe that he walks into the ocean. The show plays this for laughs, obviously. But the image, a man walking into the sea because he couldn't find a satisfying answer to why am I here, is haunting in a way that the comedy can't fully contain. And that's the thing about Gumball's darkness that I keep coming back to. The comedy never fully contains it. It sits alongside the comedy, in the same frame, in the same line of dialogue, and neither one wins. The show refuses to let you off the hook by choosing one register. It makes you hold the funny and the devastating at the same time. And that tension, that refusal to simplify, is what makes the show so powerful. There's another episode I want to discuss that doesn't show up on most darkest episodes lists, but that I think is quietly one of the bleakest things the show ever produced. The Countdown, Season 3, Episode 15, which I mentioned earlier. On the surface, it's a fun time travel romp, but underneath, it's asking a question the show never quite answers. What happens when the rules stop working? Gumball and Darwin are racing to get to school. There's a literal countdown timer on screen. When Gumball points out that the countdown is making mathematical errors, the timer corrects itself. He's broken the metatext. He's forced the show to acknowledge its own mistakes. And from that point on, time becomes unstable. They travel backwards through various eras. Caveman times, the Ice Age, the heat death of the universe. They watch reality end. They watch a new reality begin. And they end up in a version of Elmore where everyone blinks sideways. The episode ends there, in the wrong universe, with the wrong physics. And the next episode acts like nothing happened. But something did happen. Gumball and Darwin experienced the end of everything. They stood in the void between realities. And then they came back to a world that's almost right, but not quite. And nobody noticed. The horror here isn't in the destruction, it's in the return. The idea that you can go through something world-ending and come back and nobody can tell. The idea that the world you return to might not be your world at all. That the subtle wrongness, the sideways blink, is all the evidence you'll ever get. It's a quiet kind of existential horror. The kind you feel at 3 in the morning when everything seems fine, but something is just slightly off. And this connects to something even darker that happens in The Disaster and The Rerun, the Season 4 finale, and Season 5 premiere. We talked about Rob and the universal remote in the Fan Theories video, but I want to approach it from the darkness angle specifically, because what Rob does with that remote is, if you strip away the cartoon logic, one of the most horrifying things any character has done in any animated show. Rob doesn't just attack Gumball, he pauses time. He fast forwards through people's lives without their consent. He rewinds them to moments of vulnerability. He skips over experiences they need to have. He treats their existence as a recording, something to be manipulated, controlled, consumed at his preferred speed. He's not fighting Gumball. He's editing him. He's treating a conscious being's life as content. And when things go wrong, when the remote spirals out of control, the consequences are genuinely terrifying. Penny gets sent into the void. Gumball's family members are scattered across different points in time. Darwin is separated from him, and for a few minutes there, at the end of The Disaster, Gumball is falling through static, through nothing, through the space between fiction and oblivion. And the screen goes to end credits. The real end credits, with the real theme music. And for a moment, the show genuinely tricks you into thinking it's over. That Gumball fell into the void, and the credits rolled, and that's it. That's how it ends. I remember watching this for the first time and feeling my stomach drop. Not because I thought the show was really over. I knew there was a Season 5. But because the show committed to the bit so completely that for 10-15 seconds, I believed it emotionally. I felt the ending even though I knew it wasn't real. And that's the power of committed darkness. It doesn't have to actually deliver the worst outcome. It just has to make you believe, for a moment, that it might. The resolution in The Rerun is beautiful. Rob, who has been the villain for 2 seasons, chooses to sacrifice himself to save Gumball's family. He uses the remote one last time, rewinds everything, and lets himself fall into the void so that the Wattersons can be whole again. The villain saves the hero by destroying himself. And the show doesn't play this as a triumph. It plays it as a tragedy, because Rob didn't want to be a villain. He was forced into it by a narrative that had no other role for him. And the only way he could escape that role was to remove himself from the story entirely. That's the darkest thing about Rob's arc. Not the remote, not the powers, not the destruction. The fact that the universe gave him exactly two options: be a villain or be nothing, and he chose nothing, and nobody mourned him. Because nobody remembered he existed in the first place. Okay, I've been dancing around something all night, and I think it's time to say it directly. If you've made it this far, you already know this isn't just a video about creepy episodes and adult jokes. This is a video about what it means for a show to be honest with its audience. And I think the dark side of Gumball, the whole dark side, everything we've discussed, comes down to one core belief that the show holds and never compromises on. The belief is this: children deserve the truth. Not all of it, not all at once, not without context or support or the safety net of comedy, but the truth. The truth that the world is scary sometimes. The truth that people you love will hurt you. The truth that loneliness is real, and depression is real, and unfairness is real, and some problems don't have solutions. The truth that existing is hard, and beautiful, and temporary, and worth doing anyway. Most children's media lies by omission. It shows the good parts and hides the rest. It presents a world where everything works out, where villains always lose, where sadness is always temporary. And Gumball says that's doing a disservice to the kids who already know better. The kids who've seen their parents fight. The kids who felt real loneliness. The kids who know, instinctively, that the world is more complicated than the shows they watch. For those kids, Gumball is a lifeline. It's a show that says, I see the world the way you see it. I know it's scary. I know it's confusing. I know sometimes it feels like everyone else is getting the clean, simple, happy version of life, and you're stuck with the complicated one. But you're not alone. And the complicated version, with all its darkness and all its mess, is the real one. And the real one is worth living. I want to end with something that I think brings all of this together. The darkest thing about the amazing world of Gumball isn't any individual episode. It isn't the joy virus, or the puppet segment, or the authoritarian goldfish, or the depressive hallucination. The darkest thing about Gumball is something the show established in its very first season and never once let go of. Every character in Elmore is aware, on some level, that their existence is conditional. Larry works every job because if he stops, reality collapses. The void erases things it considers mistakes. Characters who stop being relevant get forgotten. The show's continuation is what keeps Elmore alive. Cancellation would mean oblivion, and the characters feel this, not consciously, most of the time, but it's there, in the way they cling to their routines, in the way they panic when things change, in the desperation with which they return to the status quo at the end of every episode. They're not returning to normal because they like normal. They're returning to normal because deviation from normal is dangerous. Because in a world where the universe itself can decide you're a mistake and erase you from existence, conformity isn't just comfortable, it's survival. And that's dark. That's the darkest thing in the show, because it's not about zombies or body horror or adult jokes. It's about the quiet, daily terror of knowing that your existence depends on someone else's continued interest in you. That if you stop being entertaining, if you stop being useful, if the audience gets bored, or the ratings drop, or the network decides to cancel, you don't just lose your job, or your house, or your dignity. You lose everything. You become static. And the show makes this explicit. The Revolt, Season 6, Episode 41, is an episode where every object in Elmore becomes sentient and rises up against the citizens. Chairs, phones, pencils, everything. And what triggers the revolt? Darwin telling the objects the truth about their existence. That they'll be used until they break, and then they'll be replaced by a newer model. That their lives are defined by their usefulness to others. That when they stop being useful, they're garbage. The objects hear this, and they snap. They attack their owners. They break free of the roles they've been assigned. And the episode doesn't entirely disagree with their anger. The revolt is played for comedy. It's Gumball. Of course it is. But the underlying point is genuine. These objects have been used and discarded their entire lives, and they're right to be angry about it. The fact that they're objects doesn't diminish the injustice. The show is asking, does consciousness create a right to dignity? And it's answering, yes, even if you're a pencil, even if you're a chair, even if the world built you to be used up and thrown away. And then there's The Inquisition, Season 6, Episode 44, the original series finale, which is the darkest thing the show ever produced. And I say that with full knowledge of everything else we've discussed tonight. Because The Inquisition isn't dark in the way The Joy is dark, or The Downer is dark. Those episodes use darkness as a tool. The Inquisition is darkness. It's the show pulling off its mask completely and revealing what's been underneath the whole time. I'm not going to go deep into the plot because we covered it in the fan theories video, but I want to talk about the feeling of the Inquisition, the way it plays, the way you experience it as a viewer. Because the episode starts with a new superintendent arriving at Elmore Junior High and things seeming normal. A little off maybe, but normal. And then, piece by piece, character by character, the superintendent starts transforming the students, turning them into realistic humans, stripping away the cartoon, making them real, and it's horrifying. Not because the transformation is painful, though it is, because the transformation means something. Being turned into a realistic human means being stripped of what makes you you. Your cartoon proportions, your bright colors, your unique animation style, all of it replaced by a generic, realistic, interchangeable human form. Your identity erased, your individuality standardized. You become what the superintendent thinks you should be instead of what you are. The show is making a statement about conformity that is frankly one of the most aggressive things I've ever seen in children's television. The villain of the piece isn't a monster or a demon or an evil force. The villain is someone who thinks they know better. Someone who looks at a world full of wildly different, beautifully strange, sometimes grotesque, always individual characters and says, "This is wrong. You should all look the same." And the horror isn't in the violence of the transformation. It's in the normalcy of it. The superintendent believes they're helping, believes they're improving Elmore by making everyone uniform, believes, with the total certainty of the truly dangerous, that difference is a problem to be solved. You don't need me to explain the real-world parallels. They're obvious, and they're devastating. And the fact that a kids' show had the courage to make them, to say explicitly that the greatest threat to a diverse community isn't external violence, but internal conformity, is something I think deserves more recognition than it gets. The episode ends on a cliffhanger. The characters are mid-transformation. The screen cuts to black, and the original series ended there. For years, that was the last thing anyone saw of Gumball. The world in crisis, the characters losing themselves, and no resolution, just darkness. I keep coming back to the thought that Gumball's darkness is, ultimately, an act of respect. Respect for its audience. The show refuses to treat children like they can't handle complexity. It refuses to pretend the world is simpler than it is. It refuses to wrap every episode in a bow and send you off feeling safe and certain and unchallenged. And I think that's rare. I think it's valuable. I think in a media landscape that increasingly infantilizes everyone, not just children, everyone, a show that says, here's the complicated truth, deal with it, is doing something important, not just for entertainment, for the development of the human beings watching it. I think about the kids who watched The Downer and recognized their own bad days in it. I think about the kids who watched The Safety and started asking questions about authority. I think about the kids who watched The Others and learned, for maybe the first time, that some problems don't have solutions. These aren't lessons you get from sanitized content. These are lessons you get from a show that respects you enough to show you the dark parts. And yeah, maybe some of it is too much. Maybe a 7-year-old doesn't need to see the joy virus. Maybe the pizza couple didn't need to watch their child get eaten. Maybe the puppets gave someone nightmares. I'm not saying the show always gets the balance right, but I'd rather have a show that occasionally goes too far in the direction of honesty than a show that never goes far enough. I'd rather have a show that trusts children with difficult ideas than a show that assumes they can't handle them. I'd rather have Gumball, with all its horror and darkness and uncomfortable truths, than a world of perfectly safe, perfectly meaningless, perfectly forgettable children's content. Because the Dark Side of Gumball isn't a flaw. It's the thing that makes the show worth watching. It's the shadow that makes the light visible. It's the cold that makes the warmth feel like home. I want to leave you with one more thought before we close out. I've been thinking about this a lot while putting this video together, and I think it's worth sharing, even though it's personal. When I first started watching Gumball, I was older than the target audience. I put it on as background noise while doing other things. I liked the visual style, liked the energy, liked the way it looked different from every other cartoon on television, but I didn't take it seriously. It was a kids show, a good kids show. Sure, a clever one, but a kids show. And then one night I was half watching The Downer, and I looked up at the screen and Gumball was standing alone in an empty world, and the darkness was closing in, and the sign said, "No escape." And I realized I wasn't just watching a cartoon character. I was watching a metaphor for something I'd experienced, something I'd felt, something that had been real and frightening and difficult, and that I'd never seen depicted so accurately in any medium, let alone a Cartoon Network show about a blue cat. And that's the moment I stopped putting it on as background noise. That's the moment I started actually watching. And the more I watched, the more I found. Layer after layer of darkness and warmth and complexity and honesty buried inside a show that most adults walk past without a second glance. I think about the people who put it on for their kids and end up watching it themselves. I think about the teenagers who discovered it during lockdowns and found a show that understood their isolation. I think about the animation students who study Gumball's visual language and the philosophy students who write papers about its meta-narrative. I think about the people who, like me, listen to these videos late at night because the world is too big and too complicated, and they need something that acknowledges that bigness and complication without pretending it isn't there. The dark side of Gumball isn't something the show hides. It isn't something you have to search for, some Easter egg buried in the background for eagle-eyed viewers. The dark side is the show. It's the reason the show works. It's the weight that keeps the comedy from floating away into irrelevance. It's the gravity that holds Elmore together. And I think the reason people keep coming back to this show, the reason there's a revival, the reason the fan community is so passionate years after the original run, the reason you're listening to someone talk about it at whatever ungodly hour you're hearing this, is that Gumball tells the truth. Not the whole truth, not unfiltered truth, but truth. Real, earned, complicated, uncomfortable, beautiful truth. About families and loneliness and anger and love and death and joy and the quiet, persistent miracle of choosing to keep going even when the darkness is closing in. If you've made it this far, and I mean really made it, from that opening image of Miss Simeon's face to this moment right now, then you already understand what I've been trying to say all night. You understand that a show can be both a comedy and a horror story, that it can be for children and about things children shouldn't have to know, but probably already do. That the darkest shows are sometimes the kindest ones, because they don't pretend, they don't lie. They look at the hard parts of being alive, and they say, "I see you, you're not imagining it, and you're going to be okay." That's the dark side of Gumball. It's honest, and honesty, in a world full of comfortable lies, might be the darkest thing of all. I think that's why the show's darkness hits so hard. It's not arbitrary, it's structural. The darkness is built into the architecture of Elmore, into the rules of how the show's universe operates. Every moment of horror, every uncomfortable truth, every adult joke smuggled past the censors, all of it traces back to the same fundamental condition. These characters exist at someone else's pleasure, and they know it, and they keep going anyway. Gumball keeps being Gumball. Darwin keeps being optimistic. Nicole keeps going to work. Richard keeps being Richard. Not because they don't know the darkness is there, but because the alternative, giving into it, acknowledging it, letting it consume them the way it consumed Rob, or the way the void consumes mistakes, is worse than living with it. And maybe that's the most human thing about a show populated by sentient objects and food characters, and a blue cat who was never meant to be the star of anything. They do the same thing we do. They live with the darkness. They carry it. They make jokes about it. They turn it into stories. And they get up the next morning and do it again. Because what else is there? I want to pause here and talk about Richard one more time, because I think his character is one of the most quietly devastating things about the show's dark side. And it's easy to miss, because it's wrapped in so much comedy. Richard Watterson is a failure. The show is explicit about this. He's a bad provider. He's a negligent parent. He's incompetent at virtually everything except eating and sleeping. Every episode that features Richard prominently is, on some level, about his inability to meet the basic expectations of fatherhood and adulthood, and the show plays this for laughs. Richard's failures are reliable comedy engines. He'll burn the dinner, crash the car, accidentally destroy something important, and the show will mine each failure for maximum slapstick. But underneath the comedy, there's something genuinely sad happening. Richard doesn't choose to be incompetent. He's been made this way. The show establishes, through The Authority and other episodes, that Richard's mother, Granny JoJo, smothered him so completely that he never developed basic life skills. She did everything for him, made every decision, shielded him from every challenge. And by the time he was an adult, the damage was done. He literally cannot function without someone else managing his life. That's generational trauma again, but from a different angle than Nicole's. Nicole's parents gave her too little. Richard's parent gave him too much. And both kinds of harm produced the same result: an adult who is broken in ways they can't fix, passing those broken pieces on to the next generation. And the universe itself seems to agree that Richard is broken. In The Job, when Richard gets employment, reality collapses. The universe won't allow him to be productive. His failure isn't just personal, it's cosmically mandated. The fabric of space-time has decided that this man cannot work. And while the show plays this as one of its biggest meta-gags, there's a reading of it that's genuinely disturbing. What if some people are trapped? What if the system, whether it's the universe or society or the narrative structure of a sitcom, has decided that you cannot succeed, and every attempt you make will be undone by forces beyond your control? That's a dark thought. And I think it resonates with a lot of people who feel like they can't get ahead no matter what they do, who feel like the game is rigged, who feel like the universe, or capitalism, or their family history, or their mental health, or just plain luck, has decided that they're supposed to fail. Richard's cosmic inability to hold down a job is funny on screen, but the feeling underneath it, the feeling of being stuck, of being predetermined, of being cosmically insufficient, is one of the most universal anxieties in human existence. And here's what makes it even more devastating. Richard knows. He knows he's failing. The Hero, Season 2, Episode 15, is the episode that proves it. When Gumball and Darwin mockingly list all of Richard's flaws, he overhears them. And he's hurt, genuinely hurt. Not cartoon hurt, not exaggerated hurt. Quietly, deeply, recognizably hurt. The kind of hurt that comes from hearing people confirm what you've always suspected about yourself. That you're not enough, that you've let everyone down, that the people you love the most see you as a joke. And the show doesn't resolve this with a speech about how Dad is actually great. Nicole kicks the boys out and makes them earn Richard's forgiveness by surviving in the wild. The lesson isn't Richard is secretly competent. The lesson is you love someone anyway. You love them not because of what they can do, but because of who they are. You love them even when they burn the dinner and crash the car and accidentally export the children to a country with fewer safety laws. You love them because love isn't a performance review. I think that's one of the most important things the Dark Side of Gumball teaches. That love doesn't require perfection. That families are built on forgiveness, not competence. That the people who drive you the craziest are sometimes the people you need the most. And that sometimes the darkest thing about a character isn't what they do. It's how much they wish they could do better. I think Gumball might be the bravest show on television. Not because it goes dark, lots of shows go dark, but because it goes dark and comes back. Because it looks at the worst things about existence. The loneliness, the futility, the horror of a world that doesn't guarantee your continued presence in it. And it says, yeah, all of that is real. And also, here's a joke about a banana watching fruit salad videos on his computer. That's not nihilism. That's courage. That's a show saying the world is exactly as dark as you think it is, and also exactly as funny, and also exactly as beautiful. And you have to hold all three of those things at once, because that's what being alive requires. So the next time someone calls this a kid's show, I want you to think about Miss Simeon, cornered and infected, smiling a smile that isn't hers. I want you to think about Gumball standing alone in the darkness while his hallucinated world collapses around him. I want you to think about Darwin in his surveillance state, wrapped in a cape, his cute face twisted by authoritarianism. I want you to think about the pizza couple watching their child being eaten. I want you to think about the tree of permanent happiness, whispering through its sewn-on smile. I wish I could feel other things. And then I want you to think about Gumball and Darwin sitting on their porch, laughing about nothing, in a world they know could end at any moment, choosing to be happy anyway. Not because they're naive, not because they don't know, but because they've looked at the dark side and decided that the light is still worth reaching for. That's the amazing world of Gumball. All of it. The comedy and the horror and the beauty and the terror. Not a kid's show, not an adult show. Something rarer, something more honest. A show that trusts its audience, all of its audience, 7-year-olds and 30-year-olds alike, to handle the truth. And the truth is that the world is dark and warm and terrifying and funny and worth sticking around for. Even when the rainbow drool is running down your chin and the reset might not come this time, and the static is always, always waiting. Thank you for watching tonight. Thank you for sticking with this one. I know it was a lot. I know we went to some places that weren't comfortable, but I think we had to go there to understand what this show really is. And I hope you feel the same way. There's a moment near the end of a lot of Gumball episodes where the chaos dies down and the music softens and the camera pulls back and you see the Watterson house from outside, just sitting there on its street, lit from within, the family inside, doing whatever families do when nobody's watching, eating, arguing, laughing at nothing, being imperfect together. And in that moment, that small, quiet, completely ordinary moment, the show is at its most beautiful and its most dark simultaneously, because you know what's out there. You know about the void, and the surveillance, and the joy plague, and the existential dread, and the darkness that lives just past the edge of the frame. You know all of it, and the house is still standing, and the lights are still on, and the family is still there, still together, still trying. That image, the lit house in the dark world, is Gumball in a single frame. Everything the show is, everything it believes, the darkness outside, the warmth inside, the thin, fragile, miraculous wall between them, and the choice made every single day to keep the lights on. If you enjoyed this, please subscribe, not for the algorithm, because as long as someone's watching, Elmore's lights stay on. And I'd rather live in a world where a blue cat and his goldfish brother exist, darkness and all, than in a world of comfortable, sanitized, perfectly safe, nothing. Good night, everyone. Sleep well.